Thus we appointed the Qibla to you. Indeed, it was a momentous change, except to those guided by Allah. Allah would never make your faith of no effect. Now, shall we turn you to a Qibla that shall please you? Turn then your face in the direction of the Masjid-al-Haram. Wherever you are, turn your faces in that direction.
As a historian of the Arabian Peninsula, I've always been interested in finding the location of the original Qibla. What direction did Muhammad pray towards before the Qibla was changed? Was it Jerusalem, as some claim? Was it Syria, as some claim? Or was it some other direction?
If we were to do this study 100 years ago, it would require an incredible amount of work and research. We would have to travel the world searching ancient sites to find the earliest mosques in Islam. Now, in a few moments, we can do what used to take a lifetime. Google Earth lets us look down on sites from space, and websites like ArcNet can combine the research of hundreds of students and professors. We can examine structures based on various criteria. We choose Islamic buildings, arrange them by date into a chronological list, then determine when they were constructed, check their Qibla direction by using Google Earth, and collate this to determine when the Qibla direction changed towards Mecca. This will give us solid data to work with.
Now, determining the Qibla direction is not an exact science. Some of the early mosques, like this one, are not exactly square. So researchers need to find the Qibla wall and project 90 degrees from that wall. Because early buildings were not square, we cannot use the side walls or the back walls. This is the mihrab of an old mosque. The early Arabs set the Qibla direction using the stars, and they were very accurate. The best way to determine the Qibla direction is to visit the mosque and use an actual accurate GPS unit. Not every mosque can be used for this study. Many of them were totally reconstructed over time, so much so that it is no longer possible to determine their original Qibla direction. However, a number of mosques survive. For instance, there is a mosque called the Mosque of the Two Qiblas in Medina. Islamic history tells us that it was in this very mosque that the companion leading prayers was told of the Qibla change. So he turned around and started praying towards Mecca. The question is, where did he originally face? Muslims have a ready answer. He prayed towards Jerusalem. Now today the Mosque of the Two Qiblas faces Mecca. But in 1987 the mosque was completely torn down so it could be rebuilt. During the construction process, the old foundation was revealed, and they discovered that it did have a Qibla wall that did indeed face north, generally towards Jerusalem. And so Muslims believe originally the Qibla was towards Jerusalem.
There is a simple way that this can be put to the test. If we go to the earliest mosques that were built, where we can identify their direction of prayer, we can plot them on a map and see if their lines converge. We'll find one of three things. They all point in different directions. They all point to Jerusalem, or they all point to another location. After the Mosque of the Two Qiblas in Saudi Arabia, there are a further 11 early surviving mosques that we can research. These are located in China, Egypt, southern Jordan, Lebanon, central Jordan, Yemen, Israel, Iraq, Jerusalem, West Bank, and lastly Lebanon. So, if we go in the order that they were built, the second surviving mosque was built in Guangzhou, China. Guangzhou is the modern name for what was known as the city of Canton.
When Marco Polo reached this city in 1300 AD, he discovered over 100,000 Arab and Persian merchants living there. You see, the Arabs had been trading with the Chinese for hundreds and hundreds of years. This is all well documented. And so Abu Waqas, an uncle of Muhammad, traveled to China on a trade mission. And according to Chinese manuscripts, He built a mosque for the Arabs in Canton in 627 AD, or 6 years after the founding of Islam. I personally examined this mosque and used a GPS unit to determine the mosque's Qibla direction. What I found was surprising. This mosque does not face Mecca. It faces 12 degrees north of Mecca, meaning that it does not face Jerusalem either. Its Qibla passes south of Jerusalem.
The next mosque was built in 641 AD, about 20 years after the founding of Islam, in the town of Fustat, just outside of Cairo.
This mosque was rebuilt and enlarged several times, so that today the original foundation is no longer evident. However, a description of the original ground plan of the mosque survives, and the Islamic records tell us that the first Qibla pointed east, and later had to be corrected towards the south, towards Mecca.
The next surviving Islamic building is the Umayyad Palace, built here at Humayma in southern Jordan.
Around 700 AD, or about 80 years after the founding of Islam, the Abbas family built a large manor house here. This house had no special mosque area. Rather, the faithful would line up here in the courtyard to pray. This house has a Qibla direction, but it is not towards Jerusalem.
The following year, a new mosque was built in Baalbek in Lebanon. Notice that its Qibla does not point to Mecca.
1 year later, the Umayyads built a large and impressive mosque here on the citadel in Amman, Jordan. This mosque points south. Mecca is over there.
A couple of years after this, in 705 AD, or 84 years after the founding of Islam, Muslims constructed the Great Mosque of Sana'a in the capital city of Yemen. While this mosque points in the general direction of Mecca, it actually points to the west of Jerusalem.
The following year, in 706 AD, the Umayyad Muslim rulers built Khirbat al-Minya, a large palace complex in Israel on the shores of Galilee. This palace complex had a specific room used as a mosque. According to the inscription set into a gateway, it was built 87 years after the founding of Islam by the Muslim ruler Al-Walid. This building and its mosque do not face Jerusalem. That same year, the Muslims also built the Wasit Mosque in Iraq. Originally, archaeologists claimed that this mosque pointed to Jerusalem. However, further research has shown that this mosque points south of Jerusalem.
The next mosque is the Al-Aqsa Mosque in Jerusalem itself. This mosque is not the temple dome, but rather the old mosque to the south of the dome. This mosque is already in Jerusalem, but it also has a Qibla, and it does not point to Mecca. The next mosque we come to was built in 724 AD, 103 years after the founding of Islam. This is the Khirbat al-Mafja Mosque, near Jericho in the Jordan Valley. This palace was built near the end of the Umayyad dynasty. By looking at the floor plan, we can see that the palace and its mosque faced south rather than towards Mecca. That same year, a mosque was built at Anjar, about 58 kilometers from Beirut. It was built near the end of the Umayyad period, and no more than 30 years later, it fell into ruins and eventually was abandoned. Since it was never rebuilt, we can easily determine the Qibla direction, which does not point towards Mecca or Jerusalem. Now, let's put this all together onto one map. The result is amazing. During the first 100 years of Islam, 100% of all the surviving mosques we have located so far face a spot in southern Jordan rather than Mecca. From north, south, east and west, mosques all face towards one spot. This isn't some small error in determining the Qibla direction. They all specifically point to just one place.
directly under this point is the ancient city of Petra.